Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today on our next topic in our series on metabolism and how our bodies burn fat versus store fat. Today, I want to talk about fasting and type 2 diabetes. And as you know, a lot of the information I'm using for these presentations are from the Complete Guide to Fasting by Dr. Jason Fung. He is a guru in the lane of fasting and especially with type 2 diabetes. And my name is Linnea Baker. I am a board certified family nurse practitioner. I'm grateful for each of you for hopping on, and I want to bring value and education to each of you. So thank you for joining me. So first, let's talk a little bit about statistics. Since 1980, type 2 diabetes has quadrupled, guys. Think about that. Since 1980, type 2 diabetes is 4 times more prevalent now. And in the past 30 years, the rate of type 2 diabetes has increased in every age group, in both sexes, and in every racial and ethnic group, as well as all educational levels. That means it does not discriminate. Type 2 diabetes is on the rise no matter what your educational background is, your ethnicity, what your racial background is, your age group, and for both sexes. We are seeing more and more type 2 diabetes and prediabetes in children now. And this is mind-boggling, guys. Half of the adult US population is either pre-diabetic or diabetic. Many of them don't even know they're walking around like this. That is a scary number, guys. So let's talk a little bit about sugar in the United States. Today, our sugar consumption in the United States is 10 times greater than it was 100 years ago. And think about that. We have these highly ultra-processed foods that are loaded with sugar and salt and artificial sweeteners and artificial preservatives and flavoring, and it is literally killing us, guys. The average American eats 4 times the recommended daily allowance of sugar. The average American, guys, eats 4 times the recommended daily allowance of sugar, and that's more than 100 grams per person per day. 1 can of Coca-Cola basically has enough sugar in it for an entire day for the max recommended daily allowance. How many soda cans do people usually drink in a day? In 1813, the average American ate less than 10 grams of sugar per person per day, guys, and we're eating over 100 grams per day now. And you can see that in our health and in the chronic illnesses that are affecting and plaguing us in the United States. The United States is the most overfed and malnourished country in the world, guys, and this is so true. We have access to so much food, but it is highly processed and loaded with sugar and salt and chemicals, and it is killing us, guys. We have access to this food, but it is not nourishing our bodies. And when we have chronic nutritional deficiencies, which we do when we eat the typical American Western diet, we have chronic hunger, chronic cravings, and chronic weight management issues. And these are all issues that we all deal with in the United States. And unfortunately, our culture has normalized this. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States, guys. Diabetes and cancer are in the top 10 causes of death for the United States. And guess what? Obesity is the leading cause of these chronic diseases. And this goes right back to the American diet, how we've normalized eating these ultra-processed foods, the lifestyle that we've normalized in the United States, and foods loaded with sugar. So type 2 diabetes, and in this presentation, we are talking about type 2 diabetes. This does not have anything to do with type 1 diabetes. These are 2 different types of diseases. This topic today is only focused on type 2 diabetes. And when we talk about type 2 diabetes, this is a disease directly related to diet and lifestyle. It is directly related to all the sugar and carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods we eat. We have normalized a sedentary lifestyle where we work and we grind it out to provide for our families, and we are in a sedentary job, many of us sitting all day in an office chair, and then we come home zombified, exhausted. We're eating these ultra processed foods. We're sitting on the couch watching Netflix and watching TV, that we have access to instant gratification with our phone and our laptops and our TVs, and we're not up and moving, and we're not exercising. We're not getting adequate sleep because our stress is high in this country, and we've normalized living a high stressed, grinding it out survival lifestyle. We've normalized feeding our kids fast food on the way to maybe a sport event if they're in sports, which is great if they are, because team sports is fantastic for children and for their overall health. But we've normalized grabbing fast food on the go instead of cooking and eating meals at home. And we've normalized being sedentary and just kind of numbing our minds with TV and trying to unwind after a very busy day, living in a very stressful environment. And what we need to shift to is taking better care of our bodies, pouring into ourselves, and setting the example for our children, because more is caught than taught, and your children are going to follow in your footsteps. And I know our children are our number one priority, and they are who we love the most and want the best for. We would do anything for our children. And that comes back to, we need to set the example and show them how to live a healthy lifestyle. So how do we get rid of the toxic glucose that's overloading our bodies, guys? Well, first, we want to stop putting that glucose, which is also sugar. Glucose and sugar are the same thing. We want to stop putting that glucose or sugar in our body. How do we do that? Well, one way, we can do a very low carb diet, which would be less than 3% of the total intake would be carbohydrates and sugar. And we're talking about all these refined, highly processed sugars and carbs, guys. The next would be a ketogenic diet, where we essentially eliminate those carbs and simple sugars. And the last would be fasting, where we don't put any food in. Part of the problem really with a very low carb diet or a ketogenic diet is it's hard to sustain for a long time. We need a sustainable, healthy lifestyle, and that can be hard to sustain for a long time. Now, we also want to burn off the excess glucose or sugar. So when we fast, our body actually burns the stored sugar or glucose, because there's nothing new coming in to be used for energy. So if you saw our prior presentations that I've done, you will notice that when we eat, our body can turn pretty much anything except for healthy fats into sugar. Even proteins are turned into glucose. We use the food we eat as immediate energy. Then we store the excess glucose, which is also sugar, in our liver as glycogen, and that's our intermediate storage for energy. And but there's a limit on how much sugar we can store as glycogen in the liver. So once we hit that limit, then we start storing anything left over in our fat cells as sugar for our long-term energy stores. And we talked about the glycogen and glucose being available as our fridge, because it's easier to access. But when we store sugar for long-term energy use in our fat cells, that's going to the freezer in the basement. It takes a lot more work to access that energy store, but we run better when we use those energy stores. And when we have the availability of sugar coming in, insulin goes up anytime we're eating. And in this country, we used to eat back in like the 1970s, we'd eat like 3 meals a day. Now we're eating 3 meals a day, and a lot of times 2 to 3 snacks a day. So we're eating 5 to 6 times a day. So our body never has their insulin level going back down, because we're eating so often. And we know that when our insulin is up, we're storing fat. We cannot burn fat as energy when our insulin is up. We said insulin equals fat storage. There's also studies comparing fasting to bariatric surgery. And in those studies, it says that fasting is more beneficial to treat type 2, sorry, I can't talk. Fasting is more beneficial to treat type 2 diabetes, and lowered both body weight and blood sugar better than bariatric surgery. So let's talk a little bit about medications in type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of too much sugar or glucose in our blood and in our bodies. When we take medication, which I'm not saying it's not needed. You obviously need to do something to lower the blood sugar in your bloodstream because it is toxic to our body. But the medications we're taking to treat them don't address the root cause of the disease. Okay. And so while it's good to be on something to lower the blood sugar in our bloodstreams because it's toxic, we also want to come up with a plan that ultimately is going to reverse this or change this disease process. So the medications are needed. Follow the guidance of your personal healthcare provider or your specialist managing your diabetes, because it is dangerous to have high blood sugar in our bloodstream. Okay. And lots of people end up in the hospital because of their blood sugars being so high. And they can go into what's called diabetic ketoacidosis. So I'm not saying don't take your medication. Definitely, whatever your doctor has prescribed for you, take it the way it's prescribed. And if you have questions or concerns, get with your specialist or doctor or healthcare provider that's managing that. But I just want to make a point that we're band-aiding the disease by treating just the blood sugar and not the root cause. So we really need to have a multifactorial approach. We need to be doing more. We need to also be focusing on lifestyle. You can't just take a medication to treat high blood sugar and keep eating Twinkies and cupcakes and junk food. You also need to be eating healthier foods and changing your lifestyle because you're just putting a Band-Aid on that. And eventually you're going to need more and more medication and eventually insulin injections to treat your diabetes if you don't make a lifestyle change as well. And we know that type 2 diabetes is too much glucose or blood sugar in the cells, but we know that the goal of the medication is to push more of the sugar or glucose into the cells. So we're just trying to cram more in the cells, but we already know it's a disease of too much sugar in the cells. Well, we don't want it in the bloodstream, but if we keep ingesting all this sugar and glucose and take the medication is just going to force that sugar into the cells. So again, that goes back to we need a lifestyle approach with the medication approach. Visceral fat is the fat in and around the organs, and it's that abdominal fat. And that appears to contribute to not only type 2 diabetes, but it also contributes to heart disease and other chronic health diseases. You can be thin and have visceral fat, which is the fat around your organs. So even though someone with more pear shape or protruding, not a pear shape, I'm sorry, an apple shaped body and a more protruding abdomen typically has more fat around the organs, more visceral fat, and that's a higher risk body type for chronic disease. We also know that thin people can have visceral fat as well. So just because you're skinny does not mean you're healthy. We know that when we fast, we reduce that visceral fat, so that fat around the organs, which reduces that risk factor for chronic disease. And we also know if you're not eating, your blood sugar is going to come down when you're fasting because you're not putting any more sugar in that's trying to get crammed into the cells. So then you have to use the sugar that's stored in the cells and eventually get to using the fat stored, your energy in the fat stores, the long-term energy in the fat stores, and you'll eventually get to burn that. So in summary, really my goal is to educate you to prevent chronic illness and to help improve your quality of life if you already have a chronic illness. So we need to start focusing on the root cause of disease and not just band-aiding the symptoms. Again, if you're on medication, I am absolutely for medication. I'm not saying I'm against it. It's there for a reason, and I'm grateful we have the medications we do. But when you're taking your medication and following with your specialist or primary healthcare provider, you also need to be discussing a healthy lifestyle to contribute to your overall health and not just band-aiding it with medication that's going to treat the symptoms. And ultimately, we do need to get the blood sugar out of the bloodstream because it's toxic when it's in our bloodstream, guys. We know that half the adult population is either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and unfortunately, many of them don't even know they're walking around like this. Diabetes is a disease of the American Western diet and lifestyle. We are sedentary. We have normalized grinding it out and surviving instead of thriving. We have normalized not taking care of ourselves. We have normalized not getting adequate sleep. We live in a high stress environment and we haven't done things to manage our stress. We eat the typical Western diet, which is highly processed, loaded with sugar. We're eating 10 times more sugar than we did 100 years ago. And I said 1 can of Coca-Cola is equal to what you should get in sugar in your entire day, not to mention all the chemicals in that are wreaking havoc on your gut and your overall health and creating inflammation. If we stop putting the sugar or glucose into the body, we can actually start burning the sugar that's in our cells. And we know that insulin pushes more sugar or glucose into the cells. So if we burn up the glucose in the cells, we're not going to have that issue of the excess sugar or glucose spilling into the bloodstream. So it's about fasting to stop the ingestion of the sugar in foods that are going to go into the cells and then spill out into the bloodstream when we can't get any more in there. Okay. So just to remind you guys, this presentation is informational and educational to help you have the verbiage and the tools to present to your personal healthcare provider or the specialist managing you for any chronic disease or medication that you're on. This is not intended to replace the guidance or information of your healthcare provider or specialist taking care of your chronic disease and medications, because they know you best, okay? But it's general information to empower you to start having conversations with them. If you are taking a medication or you have a chronic medical condition, in no way do I want you to start a fasting protocol or start changing your lifestyle as far as what you're eating without having a conversation, because you can do more harm than good. And we don't want to do harm. We want to help you improve your health. Okay. And in order to do that, when you're taking medications, they're prescribed for the lifestyle and for what you're doing at that time. And you can do more harm than good if you start making changes without talking and having a conversation with the healthcare provider managing your chronic disease and medications. So this information is to empower you to say, I want to make some changes. I want to live a healthier, better life and have quality of life. And then you go in and you have that conversation with your healthcare provider before you change your nutrition, before you start on any kind of fasting protocol, so that they can give you the right and appropriate guidance on how to take care of yourself and do it safely. Sometimes they have to adjust medications, not all the time. It's very individualized. And I want you guys to make sure you're taking good care of yourselves and you're having those conversations first. And you're not just jumping into something that is here to be something that's beneficial, but can actually hurt you if you go about it the wrong way. Okay. And that's truly from my heart. I am here to empower you and help you to have those conversations. Now, we talked about if you have a chronic medical condition or you're taking medication, you don't start anything until you have that conversation with your healthcare provider. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, this is not for you. Fasting is not for you. And if you're talking about changing any kind of nutrition or anything about your lifestyle, you're in a different category and need to go have those conversations with the person managing you, usually an OB or a midwife managing you for your pregnancy or for breastfeeding. Okay. And you can even ask your child's pediatrician as well, or your child's provider if you're nursing. And then if you're under 18 years old, this information is not for you. Fasting is not for anyone under 18 years old. Also, this is not for you if you have any kind of malnutrition or an eating disorder such as anorexia or bulimia. Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm letting you guys know, giving you the tools and empowering you, but also just be mindful that we want to be safe and do no harm. So what's next? We are going to talk a little bit more in depth about intermittent fasting and what that entails. And if you didn't watch the videos preceding this, please go ahead and watch those. The first one is debunking the calories in, calories out method. And then the rest of them follow that. So these videos build on top of each other, and it would be helpful for you to catch up by going back either through my Facebook page or through my YouTube channel to see those. Guys, I'm on a mission to positively impact your health and wellness through education and coaching, to create generational health and a health span that equals your lifespan. I want you to have healthy quality of life while living longer. And I want you to show your children how to live healthy and be in thriving mode instead of surviving. If you have questions, if you're frustrated with where you're at in your personal health journey or where your quality of life is, or where your lifestyle is right now, and you don't know where to begin, or you want to ask some questions or have some guidance, that's what I'm here for. You can private message me or comment below to schedule a free health consult with me, guys. And we can also discuss verbiage, and I can give you the tools to go ahead and have those conversations with the healthcare provider managing your chronic illness or chronic medication use as well. Okay. Thank you so much. I am so grateful for each of you. This is the book, The Complete Guide to Fasting by Dr. Jason Fung and with Jimmy Moore. It's powerful. It's written in layperson terms, so you do not need to be medical to get so much information out of this. I'm only using little snippets from this book to showcase on some things that could be powerful to help give you empowerment to start making some changes, like I said, along the side with the guidance of your personal healthcare provider. But again, I highly encourage you to read this book. It's powerful and will do a lot to open your mind to other possibilities on how to live healthier. So again, guys, I am so grateful for you. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me today. I hope this brought you some value and some education to empower you to get on a healthier lifestyle. Reach out to me. I am here. Like I said, passion is in my heart when I help people on a health journey to live a better, higher quality of life, and to empower you to show your children how to live a healthier, high quality life. Okay. Be safe until next time. Okay, guys. Thanks so much.